Hi, welcome. My name is Dr. Heather Davis, and I'm the director of the paramedic program here at UCLA. This quick video is intended to help you do two things. One, understand how to go along to get along here at the paramedic school. I find as adults, it's much easier to sort of fit within a set of expectations if you know what those expectations are. And secondly, you may have noticed that you have a course policy manual quiz due on or before the first day of class. And this video should help you pass that quiz. So let's get started. I want to introduce you to some of our key faculty members here. You'll see in the photo myself and Mr. Wheeler, who is responsible for all of the didactic portions of the program. You'll also see in this photo in front of you Mr. Stan Bakey, who is the field internship coordinator. Over there on our far right is Mr. McCullough, who is the clinical coordinator. You see up in the corner with his little guy getting his mortar board there. That's Mr. Mark Malonzo, who you probably know from prep and who will be integral in helping us understand med math here in the paramedic school. Over there on the far left, you see Miss Katie O'Connor, who is the assistant program director and who leads up much of our hybrid paramedic program. You'll see beneath her Anthony Keene, who is the skills coordinator, and below him is Miss Jessie Sellis, and Jessie handles a good portion of our hybrid skills, but also she's becoming responsible for the coordination of paramedic prep and some other responsibilities. In the rest of that photo, you see many of our skills instructors. This was taken at a Christmas party a couple of years ago. You'll see representation there from LA City Fire, LA County Fire, the prison system, Reach Air Ambulance. But the reason I'm sharing with you that faculty photo is to help you understand who some of the key players will be in your team to your success here in the paramedic school, but also to remind you that each of our faculty members does have a primary area of responsibility. And it's very helpful if you address your question to the person who is ultimately responsible for that area. Now, any of us would be happy to help you, but if you ask me a question about field internship, I'm just going to come with you and bring you over to Stan Bakey, who will help us answer that question. If you have a question about clinical, I'm probably just going to walk with you over to Mr. McCullough's office and ask Mr. McCullough your question. So if you attempt to direct your questions to the person who's ultimately responsible, I think it helps get you the most accurate information in the most timely fashion. One other thing I'd just like to remind you is that when we're on break from lecture or from skills in class, your break is also the instructor's break. So it would be really helpful if you could let them scoot out to the restroom or to refill their coffee before you begin to address your questions. Often what happens is we say, okay, back in 10 minutes, and then you all come forward to ask a question, and the poor person who's teaching never gets a chance to run out to the restroom, and then it's time to call everybody back. So just give them a second to head out. Then once they return to the front of the classroom, that's a good time to ask your question if you still have it, because you may also have been able to look it up or ask a classmate or reference the material somewhere along the way, and it might turn out that you answered your own question and you no longer need to ask the instructor. So now that you're familiar with the faculty, let's get going with some other expectations. The building is open generally from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. Mr. Gudger, Michael Gudger, our admissions coordinator, is the first person to arrive here usually in the morning. Once he's here and in the building and it's open, you're welcome in the building. Come on in, get your coffee going, get squared away. You're welcome to use any of the rooms to study. If there's a room that you want access to that's not open, just ask. And if there's a reason that we have rooms locked, we'll let you know. If we're keeping that secure for a reason because we're doing an exam in there or something, we'll just let you know. But generally, you're welcome anywhere in our suite, which is suite 250. Next, we're here until, generally there's a faculty member here until at least 7 p.m. each night, which means you can ask your questions, you can come down and get help, you can check on an assignment up until that time. After that, you're welcome in the building, but should know that you must leave when security leaves, which is 11 p.m. So we can't have any people in the building overnight. We want you to be safe, and we want to make sure that there's protection for you when you're here on premises. So you do need to leave when security leaves, which would be 11 p.m. each night. I also have a note on the slide there about parking. So if you are a sponsored student, the department has taken care of your parking and they've paid for parking passes for the entire program for you. Private students, you have the option of buying a parking package, which will essentially get you passes for $3 a day. If you choose not to purchase parking passes, please be aware that it is $10 per exit, and that doesn't have anything to do with the school. So the school doesn't get any money for parking. In fact, we pay for use of the parking facility. So you want to be aware of that, because if you leave for lunch, that's $10. If you leave again at the end of the day, $10 more. So be careful about that. Plan in advance. Make sure that you understand it's $10 per exit, and that would get really costly pretty quickly. So you might want to consider a parking package, or make other arrangements if you're carpooling with somebody or using public transportation. Next, it's how do you get credit for being here? So we are partners with West LA Community College, and they have attendance requirements, and so does the state of California in the effort to procure a license. So you must sign in each day in the morning when you arrive, and again after lunch, to demonstrate that you're here for the afternoon session. We do that by signing in the front office. There's a sign-in book, and once the time has passed that class would begin, say 8 o'clock in the morning, the sign-in book will be removed, and then you'll have to see an attendant. You'll have to see one of our front office personnel to receive a slip, which is sort of your pass into class. The attendance variance report, it just documents what time you arrived. For sponsored students, we leave a copy of that in your captain's box for timekeeping purposes. We also will give you a yellow receipt. Please have that receipt in your hand when you come upstairs. It's the clue to the instructor who's already begun teaching that you have stopped in the office. If you don't have the receipt in your hand, they're going to need to send you back downstairs to get a attendance receipt, and that's just going to waste your time. So stop in the office, see a faculty person down here, get a slip, have it in your hand, kind of show it to the instructor as you come by. That will prevent them from having to interrupt the class to verify that you did stop in the office and do what you were asked, and allow you to just sit down and get started with your class day. You'll do the same if you need to leave early at the end of the day as well. So let's say you're going to head out, you have a doctor's appointment, or you need to go to a faculty appointment with one of your kids, schools, a parent-teacher conference. It's not a problem. Let somebody know in advance that you're planning to leave early that day, and then stop in the office, get your slip so we have a record of it and a receipt of what time you actually left. So it's no problem. I'll go through the attendance policy a little bit later here and let you know how many of those you're allowed to have. But what is important is that it doesn't appear that you're trying to get away with something. Just take your lumps, as they will. If you happen to arrive early, arrive late or need to leave early, it's not the end of the world. You're allowed quite a few of those. You just need to be sure that they get documented appropriately. So stop in the office and get a slip. So if you are arriving up to 2 hours late, or leaving not more than 2 hours early, it's just a tardy. We count that as a tardy, or I should say the state counts that as a tardy. That's no problem. You are allowed the equivalent of basically 10 of those. If you were never absent, you could basically be late 10 times or leave early 10 times. Now, I think you would agree with me that any employer would certainly start to consider that excessive if you were late to work 10 times over the course of 4 months, which is what our didactic period of time is. Now, 2 tardies or early departures equals 1 absence. So you are allowed to have a total of 5 absences, and you would be terminated on what would count as the 6th one, or what would exceed the 6th one. And we can walk through that again in class, or you can read it more carefully in the manual. But what you see here is once you had whatever tardy or absence that would exceed your 6th, then you would not have enough hours in the program to successfully complete, and so therefore you would be terminated. You will get 2 more tardies or absences during clinical, and 2 more in the field. So again, by the time you finish the program, you will have been allowed to be tardy or absence a total of 10 times, which I think, again, you'll find is very reasonable. In general, we don't consider any tardy or absence excused. I like not to have to make a value judgment about what is the importance or the reason that you were gone. You're an adult. We understand that you have other responsibilities. You may have a custody case going on, and you might have a court appointment that you cannot get out of. You might be called for jury duty. You might have somebody that is in the hospital and you must be there with them. In those cases, we would consider an absence excused if it were A, unavoidable, meaning you could not reschedule it, for example, court appointments, and you have the documentation to prove it. You have the summons or the subpoena. If you have jury duty, you have your juror slip. If somebody is hospitalized, you have the paperwork, the discharge paperwork or the admitting paperwork. Those are the kinds of situations in which we would consider those excused, and they will not count against you. We need you to bring the paperwork. We'll attach it to the documentation of your absence, and then those will not count towards your total of 5 not to exceed, or whatever would be exceed the 6th one. So otherwise, honestly, you don't even need to tell us why you weren't here or why you need to leave early. You just stop in the office, say, I need to leave today at 4 o'clock. We'll write you a slip and you go on your merry way. You know why? Because I don't want you to lie to me. I don't want us to have a relationship where you feel like you need to make up a tall tale in order to get out of doing something. Again, you're an adult, and the policy is as liberal as we can make it within the regulations that the state and accreditation allows, so that you can attend to the other facets of your life that call to your attention. But we also have to make sure you're here enough to get credit for the work that you're doing, and that you meet all of the minimum hour requirements. Again, if we need to have more conversation about it once you get here, we can do that. But generally, we find that the policy, if you're making an effort to get here, it generally works pretty well for everybody. Now, once you're here, you will have a seating assignment. So in the first couple days of class, there might be a little bit of movement. You can let us know. Just speak to one of the faculty members. Let's say if you're deaf in one ear, so you need to sit on one side of the room, or left-handed folks sometimes like to sit on the end so that they're not bumping into folks as they're writing. If you have some reason that you need to sit very far forward or on one side of the room or what have you, let a faculty member know, and we'll make every effort to accommodate that. Once the seating chart is set, then please sit where you're assigned for a couple of reasons. One, it helps us get to know your names, and it helps you get to know each other's names. But on top of that, should we have any issues around academic dishonesty or where it looks like somebody was using another's work, it helps us sort of match up those scantrons and kind of where people were seated. So please do sit where you're assigned. And then we can, discuss. Sometimes partway through class, we switch it up. Other times you guys have become so invested in that seat, nobody's willing to move. So we'll see how it goes. Sometimes we'll switch them up, and we may choose to do that during your class. Just so you know and are not embarrassed for doing otherwise, we use formal address here. So proper form of address for our faculty is Dr. Rotman, Dr. Uner, Dr. Davis, Mr. Wheeler, Miss Katie, and so please use formal address until somebody gives you permission to do otherwise. So some of our faculty members, for example, Michael Gudger in the front office, he prefers to be called Michael, and he'll let you know that. He said when you say Mr. Gudger, he says that was my dad, and he prefers to be called Michael. But for most of our folks, please use formal address, and then if they correct you and allow you to use something else, then that's fine, you can do so, but otherwise formal is the right way to go. I did want to let you know that you don't have to lug all of those books here every single day. You're welcome to just bring the books that we're using at the time. So in the beginning of class, for the whole first month of class, you'll just need to bring your Nancy Caroline book, which is volume 1 of the Nancy Caroline series, so your orange paramedic book. Please bring volume 1 of that and your anatomy and physiology book. Those should be the only books you need for the first month of class. Thereafter, you'll be able to tell on the syllabus what we're working on and what you should bring. So just bring whichever books we have according to class. Now, what you should wear when you come. The field uniform or your normal work uniform is the appropriate uniform to wear here in class. So, and there's a note on the slide that says worn correctly, which means yes, you need to have your shirt buttoned and tucked in. There should be an undershirt underneath that, and generally we don't see the undershirt, but again, according to your department standards. That means your belt is on and you are wearing your pants not tucked into the top of your boots. Speaking of boots though, all departments do allow students to wear tennis shoes while they're in didactic if they so choose. You're welcome to wear your boots, but many find that it's more comfortable to be in tennis shoes. But it would not be appropriate to be in like clogs or house shoes or slippers. That's not going to work. No flip-flops or slides. We want your feet protected, but you certainly can be more comfortable if you like. Again, we do need a collared shirt on, and it should be your uniform shirt. So this is the field uniform button-up shirt, not a polo. So for our private students who are wearing, putting together their uniform, these are uniform pants and a uniform shirt with a belt, not a polo shirt. And in addition to that, you may also want to have some sort of job shirt or over shirt because it does tend to be chilly in our classrooms. One other thing is that this does not need to be Nomex. There's no need to spend, $100 on a pair of Nomex pants. You should not be catching on fire while you're in paramedic school. And for our private students, when you're in internship, also you will not be anywhere near fire. If you're responding to an incident where there is fire, your responsibility on that scene would be patient care. So you would actually be fairly far away from any flame. So just regular, it could be Dickies, it could be something from Gauls, regular uniform. Dark blue is generally preferred. You certainly are welcome to wear a light blue shirt if that's, so for example, some of our AOs or explorers might be in a light blue shirt. That's fine. If you're purchasing one, probably dark blue just fits in a little bit better. You will need a name tag. So you will be getting a Bruin card in which at orientation, we gave you a deadline by which you needed to go up to campus to get your photo taken and fill out the paperwork for your Bruin card. You certainly can wear that as your ID, but also you're welcome to have your name embroidered on your uniform shirt. That's fine too. And if you have a name badge from your department, that would be okay too. So any of those are fine. If you're dressed for work and dressed appropriately, they're going to be just fine here. For our private students that are sort of assembling that uniform, you also can purchase a patch to wear on your uniform from Michael, the school patch, and that would work out fine too. So there's a note on the slide about t-shirts. So we would never wear t-shirts, never wear t-shirt and jeans in class unless your class has put together a class t-shirt and everyone is wearing it. So while a t-shirt is pretty casual, there's some uniformity to it when the entire class is wearing the same t-shirt, and we would be okay with that. You'll notice in the room that you may have attended prep in that almost all of the classes do choose to put together a class t-shirt, and we put them on display for decoration in that room, and we would do the same with your class as well if they put together a class t-shirt. So there is a grooming standard here. It seems like you wouldn't have to say these things, but it turns out you do. So we expect students to arrive bathed with clean hair and nails, clean clothing. Your uniform should not look like you slept in it. So either toss it in the dryer or run an iron over it, but it should be appropriate and not look like you just rolled out of bed. We are okay with facial hair here in school. So whatever your department rules are, we do, the school is fine with facial hair. Now, when we go to clinical and field, then you will adhere to the grooming standards by those departments or those hospitals. So that's going to be true of tattoos and piercings as well. The school is fine with those as long as they're not offensive or could be considered offensive to others. If you have questionable tattoos, then you should just cover them. You can wear a sleeve, you can wear long sleeves, you can wear a turtleneck or a dickie if you need to cover neck tattoos, whatever. Cover them if they're offensive. If they're not offensive, then we're fine with the skin art. But our departments may not be, and so whichever department you're electing to go to internship at, or whichever hospital you choose to work at, may have higher standards or more strict standards, and in which case you would then have to adhere to those. The other just sort of grooming standard issues, obviously we want to be odor free, and that also it would include strong odors of perfume or cologne. We're going to be in close proximity to each other as we do assessments and practice skills on each other, so just nothing that would be overwhelming. And certainly in the hospital, remember, some patients actually would get nauseous by strong smells, so we just really kind of want everyone to be clean and neat and not excessive in any way with too much makeup or too much perfume or cologne, excessive jewelry. Just keep it simple and think safety, just like you would on an ambulance call or an EMS run. We have some medical requirements. You have a packet from your pre-course packet. This is things like immunizations, like TB and hepatitis B, varicella, Tdap, flu if we're in flu season. Those medical requirements are actually due the first day of class. So we're hoping that you roll in on the first day of class with that packet complete. So we can afford a tiny bit of flexibility, but once we begin doing skills, that really is sort of our hard stop for your medical requirements, because you will be lifting and moving, you'll be examining each other, touching each other, and at some point we're going to be sticking IVs, and we really can't have each other exposed to body fluids of any sort until we assure each other that everybody meets the health requirements. So while we can afford a little bit of flexibility, by the first skills day, you will no longer be allowed to come to class if you haven't turned in a completed medical requirements packet. This means you've had a physical in which a physician or nurse practitioner, PA, has declared you physically fit enough to participate in all aspects of the program, that you demonstrate that you've had immunizations, or you've had the disease, or you are otherwise immunized, and that you are fit enough to be mask fit tested. Now, we're not asking that you get the mask fit testing. We'll actually do that for you here in school, but your physician does have to declare that you are healthy enough to put on a mask and be mask fit tested. So we need that paperwork completed. One last thing, we need a copy of your health insurance, front and back of the card. You must have health insurance the entire duration of the program. If you don't have health insurance, again, you're not able to be here. We would never want you to have to choose between your health and safety and continuing in the program. So should you have an exposure, it is the individual student's responsibility, not the school's responsibility. Now, for our sponsored students, your department is likely covering those under workers' comp. But for our self-pay sponsors and our private students, that is your own private health insurance that has to cover any kind of injury or exposure. So whether that's an accidental stick that you do to yourself when you're practicing here in class, or you go to pick up a patient and you hurt your back, or an exposure that you might occur when you're doing clinical time, we want you to be able to be seen and have your healthcare needs met. And to do that, you need health insurance. So again, if you didn't have those things demonstrated, proof of proper documentation, by the first day of skills, you'll no longer be able to attend the program. And every day you miss counts as an absence. After you would have 5 of those, you would no longer be able to attend the program. You'd actually be terminated for failure to meet those requirements. So don't let that happen. Take care of those things right now, and be working and staying in good communication with our front office staff so that we know when you're going to get those things taken care of. Sponsored students, make sure you're in contact with the department and you know the process for getting those. For example, some departments, they send a nurse down here to the school and they'll take care of all your immunizations here at school. Others, however, send you to a county clinic or a city clinic, and you need to follow their responsibilities and their rules and make their sort of appointment requirements. Once you start school, you won't have very much time to take care of those things. So Try to really take care of those before class begins or right away in the beginning of class. This is going to get much more difficult to do so as class goes on. First day of skills is about 2 to 3 weeks in, and again, once we had the first day of skills, you would not be able to attend after that if you didn't have your proof of medical requirements. So please take care of that right away. Okay, thinking about being here in the building. This is a shared facility, as you probably have noticed. We have other neighbors we have other healthcare partners who are neighbors. We have a law firm in the building. We have other businesses, some in tech, some in government affairs, and they need to run their normal operations as well. So it's really important that we conduct ourselves as if we are in a shared facility, keep your voices low, and we really would like for you to stay inside our suite whenever possible. So for example, if you finish your quiz early in the morning and you have 15 or 20 minutes to spare, please don't come out into the foyer and get louder and louder as more of you join each other and start talking about the quiz. Just stay in suite 250 upstairs. You're welcome in the skills rooms, in any other classroom that's not being used, and that helps to manage our volume. Be aware that anytime you're stomping your feet or clapping or making loud noises, we can hear that right through the floor. We can hear it down here in our offices, but all the other businesses that are underneath us can hear it as well. So really be very aware of that. In addition, we'd like to not have you line that corridor right outside the Walter Graf classroom, because the women's room for all of the second floor is right there outside that Walter Graf classroom, and we would not want female business associates from the other suites to have to traipse through 20 or 30 men to get to the bathroom. So please leave that space open, make them feel comfortable if they need to come use the facilities there. I would ask that you either stay in our suite in 250 or go all the way outside. Just a note though, when you're outside, remember, these are 3- and 4-story buildings. Everybody in those buildings can see what you're doing out there. So avoid horseplay and thinking about the way you conduct yourself in the parking lot and around the vehicles. Remember, somebody is probably watching that. And again, these are cameraed facilities as well. So we would like for you to stay in the suite, keep your voices down as much as possible, and really move all the way out of the building if you're going to be congregating and visiting. In any UCLA facility or shared facility or leased facility, these are tobacco-free facilities, and that's of course because we're a healthcare organization. So this includes e-cigarettes, it includes chew, and it also includes marijuana. And so we can't have any of that smoked on the premises, nothing around the doors. The idea is people should not have to walk through your smoke cloud in order to get to their place of school or work. So again, if you're going to use tobacco products, probably best to go out to your car to do so, and then return to campus after you have finished. Because this is a shared facility and there's a lot of people in here, sometimes there's as many as 120 people in our suite at one time, we'd ask that you clean up messes, whether they're yours or not. You'll frequently see one of us bending over to pick up something that's on the ground or wiping up a spill. Please wipe up after yourselves. There's a lot of you in close proximity and it's easy to get sick. And once one person in that classroom gets sick, boy, we start to have an epidemic going on in there. So wipe down the tables, wipe down the arms to your chairs, doorknobs. We have Clorox wipes and hand sanitizer in many locations upstairs. Use them frequently to stay healthy. If you need additional supplies, there's a day porter here in the facility. If you see him, just ask him, hey, we need paper towels, or hey, can you refill the soap in the men's restroom? If you have a major issue, there's a spill, an overflowing toilet, a faucet that keeps running, please let Michael know down here, and Michael can schedule the engineer to come over. He can ask maintenance to come over and fix those things. And then we will not ask you to engage in hard labor here, but we will ask you to help you keep the facility that you're using every day. You're spending at least 8 hours a day here. We'll ask you to help keep it clean. And so that's just wiping down, when people toss things at the trash and sort of miss, wiping down behind there, keeping your kitchen clean, keeping the refrigerators from getting gross. And we'll assign those by table or by team once you guys have skills teams, and we'll ask you to help participate in. We'll ask you to help participate in keeping the facility looking nice. Speaking of keeping the facility looking nice and also keeping our planet from getting any warmer, we will ask that so you have a recycling officer, or what we might call the Dean of Green, somebody who is responsible for really encouraging everybody in the building to make it easy to do the right thing, make it easy for them to recycle. We ask that your class recycle things that you can get a California return on. So you're welcome to keep that money. You can pay for house items, peanut butter, bread, coffee in the kitchen, or you can use it to pay for your class t-shirts. That's your class's money. You're welcome to do with it as you please. We want the recyclables to get taken back. If your class doesn't want to do that, then we ask that you communicate with the evening cleaning crew and give them permission to take the recyclables. They're happy to do so, but will not do so without your permission. So we don't really care as long as they get recycled, we don't really care how that happens, whether your class chooses to do it or you give permission for the evening crew, but we don't want all of that in the trash. So we'll ask that your class clearly mark recyclable receptacles and that we put recycling in there. Additionally, I would just ask that you make sure it's clean and dry. You can imagine if you're the person who has to take back the recyclables, you don't want somebody's last little sip of soda, the last little bit of yogurt in all those containers congealing in the bottom of that container and putting it in the back of your car. So make it easy to do the right thing so that we produce a lot of waste here. We just want to make sure it gets taken care of. Speaking of waste receptacles and how we end up with so much, it's because we do allow students to eat here. You're going to be here for 8 or more hours a day. We find that most students will eat at least 1 meal, sometimes 2 here, and you're welcome to eat in class as long as it's not a distraction. So for example, if you're going to have chips, we'd ask, hey, pour them out on a paper towel so that every time you go to get a chip, it's not crunch, 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 and crinkling the bag. Please don't eat things that are super smelly in that room, but otherwise the room's going to reek all day, and you can imagine with 2 or 3 or 4 really odorful smelly things, and it's going to be really uncomfortable in there. So probably not reheating fish in the upstairs kitchen. That's probably not a great idea. Think about curry, other things that are really strong smelling. That might not be the best idea, but as long as it's not a distraction, if it's fairly quiet, you're welcome to eat at your desk. Many students choose to exercise at lunch to get an energy boost, and then they'll eat in that first hour after the lunch break, and that's totally fine. So we would ask, though, that you don't eat in the skills stations. In those cases, you're touching equipment that other students are touching. So we wouldn't want you going from mouth to mannequin and then somebody else putting their hands right where you basically have had your mouth now. So those rotations are only 45 minutes long. I think you probably survive without a snack. So we'll ask that you are welcome to eat in the classroom. You're welcome to prepare food upstairs, but please don't eat in the skills stations. So this sounds like it would go without saying, but I do actually need to remind you that it would be inappropriate to have a relationship with any of our faculty while you're a student. And that means all the while that you're a student, all the way till graduation. Our instructors will be in a position to evaluate you, and so that puts them in a position of authority, and we would never want that to be exploited. So please refrain from engaging in any sort of social or sexual relationship with any of our instructors. That's full-time faculty, skills instructors, preceptors, nurse preceptors at the hospital, until you are well finished with paramedic school. Then you're welcome to circle back with whomever you like. But please, while you're in school, no fraternizing with the faculty. You should know that while you're here in the building, there are cameras in almost all of our classrooms. So there's both audio and video recording. The purpose is for education. We like for you to be able to play back that video and watch yourself performing scenarios or performing skills to see how you're doing and to learn to critically self-evaluate. In this job of being a paramedic, there's a fair amount of autonomy. You frequently will not have with you a supervisor or an instructor, somebody going behind you going, oh, you need to work on that. Oh, you have to get better with this. You should take a class on that. You just are going to need to be able to sense, I'm getting rusty on this. I need some new information on that. Boy, I haven't done this in a long time. So we want you to learn to self-evaluate. And we do that through the use of audio and video recording in the classrooms. There's not video recording in the hallways, but there is in our classrooms for educational purposes. So be aware of that, and that anytime you're in those rooms, you're being recorded. During class, you are welcome to use your laptop for note-taking purposes, but it really is just for note-taking purposes. That is the intention. It seems like you would just be able to quickly look something up, and as long as you're doing something that's class-related, it's fine. But I'll tell you, many of our faculty find it very frustrating when they're trying to explain something and they're about to tell you something and somebody's looking it up faster than they can get it out of their mouth, and students keep raising their hand and going, oh, Google says this. Oh, this is the website says this. And the instructor's thinking, yeah, I'm trying to tell you that, but you keep looking it up faster than I can explain it. So please just stay on task, stay on topic. You're welcome to take notes on your laptop, but that's really what it should be used for. Please don't be surfing the internet. Don't be playing video games. And really important, don't be texting during class. That includes group texting. So generally group texts start out really well-meaning. People want to remind each other, hey, don't forget this is due. Hey, check out this website. There's a cool video explaining something the professor's talking about. But it quickly goes awry oftentimes where people start sending things they think are funny. And I'll have you know, we're not unconscious at the lectern when one person, oh, we can see that you're engaged in some other activity other than related to class, and we can see that text message go around the room, and each of you sort of begin to respond to it. It's incredibly distracting. You might remember from the adult learner study strategies lesson that you received in prep that your behavior affects the people around you. We only have so many channels, 3 to 5 channels in our working memory, and when one is taken up by somebody texting or the phone vibrating in your pocket or you thinking about this, funny meme that you just got, it's taking up your learning capacity, but it's also affecting the people around you. Now you may be really on top of it and you don't have to study very much, but some of the people around you really will, and they can't afford for one of their attention channels to be taken up with your sort of game playing in class. So please stay on task, stay on target, stay focused, no texting, no phones, no talking in class. And that would be true in a skill station as well. Put those phones away unless you are recording a skill that's happening, or unless you are entering something into our electronic record keeping, then those phones should be in your pocket. We don't want any texting or answering the phones. If you get a phone call during class, you'll just need to, press silent and pick that up at the break, please. Speaking of the way that we communicate with each other, we need to be really careful about language. This is a shared facility and it's a shared learning space, and our responsibility is to make it a safe and comfortable learning space for everyone. So you may be very comfortable with explicit language, but others around you may not be, and this is not a fire station, it's not an ambulance bay, it is not a locker room. So we need to be very sort of careful and formal in our language. Help each other too. I recognize that some of you use colorful language and don't even hear yourself. It is the every fifth word is something that you couldn't print in a newspaper. So please, not cable language, regular prime time language in class, and help each other, because if it becomes enough of an issue that I need to speak to you about it or write you up for it, it's going to be a problem for you at work as well. Remember, most of you actually have language policies at work, and the same language that would not be appropriate there is not appropriate here. You see on the slide this concept called fighting words. I do want to make sure that I bring that up. Around language is also sort of the way we interact with each other, and we want to be really careful that we don't engage in things that might fall in the categories of harassment or hazing. And so it is one of the things in your policy manual is this concept called fighting words, which are words used to provoke a response from somebody. So it might be something like, come on, let's go. Come at me, bro. It might be something as stupid as that, but it also might be something that nitpicks at somebody when they have told you that bugs them. In that case, you are intending to gain a response from somebody. So if you keep saying something that falls in the category of intending to provoke a response, those are what we consider fighting words, and that would be inappropriate, is explicit against that in your policy manual. And be really careful that we're not doing things to antagonize somebody else. If there's somebody in class that you don't love, stay away from them. If you need to make sure that you're not in the same skills group or you're not put in the same group with them, come privately speak with one of the faculty and we'll try to make those arrangements. But we cannot antagonize one another. This has to be a safe learning space for everybody. This seems like it would go without saying, but it turns out we're going to touch each other here in an appropriate way. So in our skill stations, one of the ways that we learn to take care of other humans is by practicing on each other. But once in a while, I literally will get a student who says, "Ooh, I'm not comfortable with somebody touching me," or "I'm not comfortable touching others." That's going to be a problem, because in this classroom, we're going to appropriately learn to do physical exam and procedures, medical procedures on each other. And so you should expect to be touched, and you should expect to learn to touch each other appropriately. We also want to make sure that on skills days, you're wearing appropriate undergarments so that we can do that. So that might mean a sports bra and or swimsuit. It might mean trunks for gentlemen. If you don't care to have your skin exposed, you're sensitive about that, then perhaps it's a rash guard so that we can still listen to lung sounds that get down to what would be a simulated skin level. But we can't be listening to lung sounds and taking blood pressures and doing IVs through your shirt. So we're going to need to get down to fairly close to skin level. So we want to make sure that you wear whatever you would be comfortable in on those days so that you can participate fully in skills. Speaking of skills, we have to document everything we do here. The program, the state, and our national accrediting body have requirements for everything that you will do. Everything from how many times you will assess a cardiac patient, a seizure patient, a respiratory patient, to how many IVs you'll start, how many medications you will administer. Everything we do has specific numbers of requirements, and also how many times you'll practice on each other, how many times you'll practice on a mannequin, how many times you'll practice on a real human, how many you'll do in lab versus how many you do in clinical and in the field. So those requirements get documented into a system called FSDAP. It's the vendor's name of the system we use for documentation requirements. We give you 72 hours to get the information from a skills lab day documented into FSDAP. You should be doing it in real time as it's occurring, but we give you up to 3 days. After that, we find that your memory starts to fade and you start frankly making things up because you can't quite remember. That's not appropriate. Documentation is 10 to 15% of your grade, depending on which phase of the program you're in. You have 72 hours to get it in, and then the shift locks, in which you either cannot enter the information, so you lose out on those practices that you did get, or you'll have to ask for the shift to be opened, and you'll need to do that in the FSDAP system, and it records how many times you've done that. You get 5 free opens, so 5 times you can forget or do it incorrectly in a way that we need to reopen it so that you can correct it. Thereafter, it starts subtracting from your grade. So you get 5 freebies during lab, and you'll get 5 during clinical and field. The reason we allow 5 during lab is because you've just started learning how to do it, and we assume that there'll be a few times that you make mistakes or you forget. But after we've done it for 4 months together during lab, by the time you get to clinical and field, you should be a pro at the documentation. And so then we get a little bit less forgiving with how many times you need to have a shift reopened. You're being graded on your accuracy, completeness, timeliness of your documentation, and it does count. Just like in field internship, or just like in this world of EMS and fire, you absolutely could not go home on a 4-day without doing your documentation and come back and think that somebody's going to think that's okay. You have to complete your documentation before you go home from that shift, and we're trying to simulate that same behavior here. We find that it's most accurate when you do it right away. So we'll teach you how to do this on the first skills day, but you should know that it is a fairly big chunk of your grade, 10 to 15%, depending on which part of the program you're in. And we do expect that it's done timely and correctly. So just like falsification of documentation could be a problem, any kind of academic dishonesty falls in this category of what we might consider cheating. So that might be deliberate attempts, as you see in the photos, to use somebody else's work, but it also could be use of unauthorized materials. You see there somebody with notes on their hand or tucked in their sleeve. We've seen students put notes inside the barrel of a clear pen or pencil, mechanical pencil, put them on the inside label of their water bottle, have a tablet or a book in their lap, have their phone out. We do not have any devices anywhere near us during testing. We like to have those not even in the test room. You'll leave those outside the test room on block exam days. On quizzes, we just like to have everything secure and put away. But cheating might be considered the appearance of cheating, if it looks like you're cheating, or if you're making your work available to somebody else. So it's your job to protect your hard work. Keep your Scantron closer. Keep your device that you are entering in. If you're taking a test on a tablet, keep that close so that nobody can see it. Don't be holding it up. Don't be standing it up so that people behind you can see what you're choosing. But any unauthorized use of materials, study materials, devices, any cheating or appearance of cheating will be handled as academic dishonesty. We typically suspend students and then conduct an investigation. You should know that, and this will come up again in another slide, we have 60 days to conduct an investigation, and it often takes every one of those 60 days. So if you're suspended during that time, you can forget finishing with this class. You will definitely, even if it turns out that it looked like it, but we're not able to prove it, you still are going to be inconvenienced significantly just because of the process. So make sure that you protect your work, that you keep your eyes to yourself, that you don't have any unauthorized materials with you, and you do a really good job of really making it clear that this is your work and your work alone. So cheating is certainly something that could come up in an affective evaluation, but the affective evaluation is often a little bit more subtle. The affective evaluation literally is an evaluation of behavior, and it's a requirement in the education standard. So it's actually a requirement in the national curriculum, and the actual evaluation tool, the affective evaluation, is put out by the federal government. It's an appendix to one of the federal documents. So you see the categories that are listed there, and in your policy manual there's a description of what we mean by leadership, communication, things like being able to communicate, give a direction without sounding snappy or snarky. If somebody challenges you, that you're able to respond without sounding defensive. Hygiene is sort of looking the part and dressing in your uniform worn correctly. Careful service delivery might be cleaning up after yourself, not moving a mannequin with your foot, or lifting up one of our mannequins by their head, but carrying them like you would carry a patient. Time time management, things like getting assignments in on time, prioritizing during a scenario to handle the most critical tasks first, integrity or honesty, diplomacy, again, being respectful of others, patient advocacy, really trying to do the right thing and being proactive and being aggressive in your care. Empathy could be towards a patient, but it could be towards another classmate, not being disrespectful or snide to a classmate. Conducting yourself with confidence, and by motivation, we mean taking learning opportunities, showing up for tutoring if you need it, asking for help. All of those fit within the affective evaluation. We must evaluate your behavior before you leave didactic, before you leave clinical, and before you finish the field internship. So expect that we will be commenting on your behavior and having conversations with you. This is a must pass. You'll notice in your policy manual, this is pass fail, and you may not matriculate to the next part of the program until you have passed the affective evaluation. So your behavior does matter, and you have to show us that you can, at least when you're here and representing yourself as a UCLA student, that you can conduct yourself in a way that is honorable to the profession. While you're a student here, you will actually be earning certification cards for BLS, ACLS, and PALS. Those are all American Heart Association programs, and you also will earn a pre-hospital trauma life support card. Those certification cards are issued according to the rules of that organization, American Heart Association, or NAEMT, which puts out the PHTLS program. So even if you already have those cards, you're going to earn new ones with us here at the paramedic school, and we use the passing scores of each of those requirements. So for AHA, they have an 84%, not 80, but 84% is passing, and you'll need to earn an 84% on their exams in order to earn a new certification card. For PHTLS, it's actually a little lower. It's 76%, and you'll just need a 76 to pass and get a PHTLS card. So it's great if you already have those, but you will need to earn them again with us, because now you're earning it at the paramedic level as a paramedic student. When you earned them before, you would have been an EMT taking those courses, and the responsibilities and requirements are a little bit different. So let's talk about grading and how we issue grades here. So 80% is passing on pretty much everything. The exceptions I've already kind of noted to you, and those are certification programs that are offered outside of UCLA. So 80% is passing on quizzes and on block exams here, and you have to pass 80% of the quizzes. So for example, if we have 45 quizzes, then you could fail 9 of them, but not 10. So you would, if you had 6, 7, 8, 9 quiz fails, no problem. On the 10th one, you'd be terminated. And of course, we'd be having a conversation before that to find out what's going wrong. Do you need help? What's going on? Now, we don't retake quizzes. And the reason for that is we have found that when you're restudying for a quiz that you failed, you're actually not studying for the next quiz. And you end up it becomes the beginning of the end for many students. You find yourself in a downward spiral where you're constantly behind and failing more things. So we just put that behind us. We do an error analysis, figure out what went wrong, note that, go home and try to review that and study it and close any learning gaps that we have, and then move on to the next quiz. Additionally, if you're late, you should keep coming because you'll get whatever time is left for the quiz. So let's say we have 45 minutes for the quiz in the morning. We're going to take the quiz from 8 to 8:45. You arrive at 8:20. Great, you have 25 minutes left to take that quiz. So keep coming, get here as quickly as you can. Don't think, oh, I'm late, might as well stop and get breakfast now. Don't, keep coming, because you want to see those questions on the quiz, and any score is better than a 0. So even if you got a 50% on that quiz, it's still better than a 0 in the grade book, which is what you would get if you didn't take the quiz. And there's no retakes. So keep coming. You get whatever time is left. You get whatever score you earn. But the benefit is not only did you get to take the quiz, you saw the quiz questions, you get to participate in the quiz review. If you're not here for the quiz, then you don't participate in the quiz review, and you really miss out on the explanation and the discussion around some of those quiz items. So keep coming. When we have assignments due, sort of homework assignments or assignments that are posted in Jones and Bartlett that you need to finish, we turn those off at midnight. So we'll only accept them up until midnight before a block exam. Here's why. We don't want you up till 4 o'clock in the morning doing assignments that you should have done 2 weeks ago. If you're up till 4 o'clock in the morning, first of all, go to bed. You need to sleep. That's when you solidify what you've studied. So before a block exam, set a goal. Midnight, you want to be in bed sleeping, and you'll do your best work on the exam the next day. But let's go back. We don't want you up half the night doing assignments that you really should have completed already. So if you're going to do the assignments, which of course we expect you to do, they need to be done by midnight before the block exam. Now sometimes we'll assign an assignment today that is due tomorrow before class. The due date then would be 07:59, so it's due right before class. If you're turning it into JB, you'll need to have it uploaded before 07:59. If it's something we've asked you to turn in hard copy in class, then you turn it in before we begin class. That's how you get full credit. You lose 10% per day for every day that it's late. And so as of 8 o'clock, it would be late, either in JB or in the classroom, it would be late, and you'd start losing credit. So if you're going to do it, might as well do it on time, get all the points possible, and then do know that we'll turn them off and we'll no longer accept them after midnight before a block exam. So let's talk about block exams. 80% is passing for the block exams as well, and you can only fail 1 block exam. When you retest, you must pass the retest, and you cannot fail any more exams or you would be out. So even if you score a 95 on the retest, 80% is what goes in the grade book. The thinking is sort of like this. You shouldn't be able to fail an exam, restudy, get a 95, and get a higher score in the grade book for a retest than somebody who prepared adequately the first time. So if you have to retest, 80% is the max score that's going in the grade book, and then you cannot fail another exam. If you don't take the test on the date it's scheduled, so occasionally you'll have, let's say, a chief's interview, or you have a funeral you need to attend, you have something that's unavoidable, we understand that. But if you don't take the exam on the day that it's scheduled when everybody else is taking it, the max score you can earn is 80%. That's what will go in the grade book. So once again, if you're going to take it 2 days later, you can't earn a higher score than the classmates that prepared and took it on the day that it was scheduled. And lastly, the final exam is no retakes. It's what some people would refer to as sudden death, which means if you fail the final, you're out of the program. No retakes, and we do not review the final exam. The grading scale is as follows during didactic. It changes a little bit for clinical and field, and if you want to look that far ahead, you can take a look in your policy and manual at how those change. But during didactic, quizzes are worth 20%. Quizzes we consider to be formative. They count, they matter, they definitely will affect your grade, but we also don't want you to spend so much time worrying about quizzes that you sort of upset the apple cart and can't focus on new material. So quizzes are worth 20% of your grade. Block exams are a big deal. They're worth 40% of your grade. Those are more summative. They are really sort of all the material that we've covered to date. Assignments like homework assignments or papers, writing assignments, those things are worth 15%. And the document and the final exam is worth 10%. Documentation, all that FISDAP that we talked about, putting in your skills and your assessments and your scenarios, that's worth 10% during didactic. It increases its value to 15% once we get to clinical and field. And then participation, that's everything from being here on time, being dressed appropriately, and answering questions when we ask, giving good eye contact to the instructor to show that you're paying attention, you're listening. You might bring in something, an article that we're talking about, you saw something in the news or on the internet that's related to something in class, bringing that in for the class to benefit from. If we need to reset a room, jumping up and helping with that. It's being an active member of what's going on here and part of our learning community. That's worth 10% of your grade. Let's talk about skills for a second. Skills are graded just a little bit differently. We will have 3 major skills exams in the program, not including National Registry, because that's not really part of the program. We'll do it while you're still a student here so that you have that completed before you finish internship. But let's just talk about the 3 graded skills exams. So we'll have an exam partway through, which is called a midterm skills exam. Then we'll do one right before we go to clinical. That's a clinical proficiency exam, basically saying we're getting ready to go to the hospital. And so we're going to test those things that you're likely to get to do in the hospital, like IVs and intubation and some of our cardiac skills. And then we'll do a scenario-based practical right before we go to field internship. This is where we test Megacode and our PALS scenario, our PHTLS scenario, a medical assessment that requires medication administration, basically in the format in which you would run a call in field internship. What we're trying to determine there is, are you ready to go to the field? We want you to show up on your first day of internship and have your preceptors go, okay, I can work with that. We don't want you to show up and then to think, oh my gosh, they can't even do an assessment. Their primary is a mess. They're all over. They don't delegate. It takes forever. We don't want that. If you're still kind of all over the map with your assessments, we'd rather keep you here and keep working with you and send you to internship when it's appropriate for you to be there. We don't want to have you go to internship prematurely and then set you up for lack of success in the field. So we'll do those 3 skills exams. Now, when you'll always have 3 tries at every station. The reason you get 3 tries is because we know that there are variables in skills. Different evaluators, different equipment, mannequins function a little bit differently, and oftentimes you have a team with you, and sometimes your performance gets affected by how well your team is following your instructions or anticipating your needs. So we understand that there are more variables, and therefore you get more tries during skills. However, you do have to pass half of the skills that are tested that day. So for example, on midterm skills, I think there are usually 10 skill stations. You must pass at least 5 of them in order to get 3 attempts at the other station. So to get 2 more tries at any station that you failed. The thinking is this: you can't come in here and fail every station. You basically cannot kill all your patients in one day. That's just not going to work. You need to prepare appropriately for an exam. But if you have a couple of, bobbles of a problem here or there, or you're just having a bad day, no sweat. We can retest some of those stations on the next day that we're doing testing. But you can't come in here and fail everything. These are the same rules that National Registry uses, and so we just try to be consistent with that as well. So if there are 10 stations, got to pass 5 of them. If they're in the clinical proficiency exam, I think there are 8 stations, got to pass at least 4 of them in order to get your retested temps. But now in the scenario-based practical, there's only 4 stations, which means you have to pass at least 2 of them. That's where it starts to get a little bit tougher and a little bit trickier, is when there's only 4 stations, got to pass at least 2. That means you can only fail 2. If you failed a third, you would just be out of the program. So that's how skills testing goes. And then let's talk about just what happens if if there's a problem. So if you fail out of the program, you fail out in didactic, or you fail out during, clinical, you can reapply. Basically, the thinking is, if we took you once, we probably would take you back, unless we identified some real major disconnect and we didn't think you would be successful again. It was never our desire to take somebody's money if we don't think that they can be successful. You were admitted here because we believe that you have the ability to do this. And so if something went wrong and you were unsuccessful, we generally would welcome you back. However, if you had a behavioral issue and you were actually terminated, then you're not welcome back, because the thinking is, why would I want to put up with you again? If it was a problem the first time, I probably don't want to deal with you a second time. So if you are terminated for behavior, you are generally not welcome back here. But before termination, often becomes a investigation of whatever the behavioral complaint is. So generally what happens is we notice a student that there is a complaint against them, either from an instructor or from another classmate, and they are suspended while we investigate. Just in the university process, it does take generally every day of that 60 days we're allowed for the investigation. And then we have 30 days in which which to prepare a response. And that's because the response just doesn't come out of my office. It goes through several layers of university sort of red tape or bureaucracy, if you will, and many offices have to review what it is we're doing to ensure that the students' rights have been protected and that the university's interests are protected. So if you're doing the math on that, that's a long time. It's 60 to 90 days. You're going to be out of the program while we investigate what happened. So even if you're found innocent, if you will, or we determine that we're not going to terminate you, you're still not going to finish with your class. You may be invited back to finish with another class, but it's still going to be quite a disruption to your education. So the moral of this story is just behave yourself when you're here. Don't bother other people, be respectful, be polite, apply yourself, and you should have no trouble. But we don't want to end up in one of these. And then remember, those of you that are here basically at work, those of you that are sponsored, any kind of trouble that is a problem here at school is going to involve the department as well. And there'll likely be an internal affairs investigation as well. So most of us do not need that kind of hassle. We don't need that kind of distraction for sure in our class. So we ask you just do the right thing and conduct yourself in a way that is respectful and honorable, and we should have no problems here. So if you're terminated for behavior, we generally do not welcome you back. You have the opportunity to appeal that if you think that we were unjust in some way. You have 10 days to make that appeal in writing, and you can find how to do that in your policy manual. Now, keep in mind, if you fail out for academic reasons, there's no appeal of that, because sort of what are you going to argue? You missed all those questions. It's generally fairly cut and dry. So fail out, you're welcome back, no appeal. Terminated for behavior, suspended first. Then if you're terminated, you can appeal that. You have 10 days to do so in writing. But remember, you wouldn't be welcome back if you indeed were terminated for behavior and that sort of, stuck. If you're terminated in the field, we do have the opportunity to apply for re-entry. Our re-entry process allows you to basically gain advanced placement credit for the work that you have done. So you'll test out of didactic and clinical, demonstrating that you still have that knowledge and you don't need to sit through didactic again, in which case then you just do a re-entry exam, the scenario-based practical, complete any missing elements of your application in your file at that time, and then you can be placed again for field internship. There's a smaller fee. Typically, folks who are coming back through re-entry do not pay a full tuition, and the real benefit to you is that you don't have to sit through didactic again, so it saves another 4 or 5 months that you don't have to participate in that if you don't need to. We think of that as kind of like a little insurance policy. We know that the least controlled element of our educational process is the field internship. We rely on our affiliate partners for internship spots and for preceptors, and some preceptors are wonderful and others are still learning to be great preceptors, and so there's some variables there, and also personality and station dynamics can play a role in success in field internship, and so there might be a need to repeat that. So we'll generally have students do that at a lower cost if they're qualified to do so. So that's a nice benefit of our program if it ends up applying to your situation. Speaking of field internship, keep in mind that while some students will go to field very quickly after clinical, for some students there will be a bit of a break. It might be a couple of weeks, and in some cases up to 90 days. Keep that in mind and sort of keep aware of that, because for some students it behooves them to actually go back to work and earn a little bit of money again before they start field internship. Others will go immediately and there will not be any time to do that. But just keep in mind we have 90 days to place students in field internship, and some will wait that long. So you should have now the information that you need to take and pass the policy manual quiz, which is one of the assignments in Jones and Bartlett. It's open resource, so you're welcome to watch this video again or just fast forward to the parts you need, or use your course policy manual, which is also posted in your JB account. So feel free to use whatever resources you need to take and pass the quiz. It does count as an actual quiz, so it would be silly not to look up all the answers and get 100% on one of your very first quizzes in the program. So we look forward to supporting you in your success here in paramedic school. We hope that this video helps you understand how to go along to get along here at school, and we look forward to seeing you on the first day. Take care, everyone.